Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our weekly webinar today looking at the federal CARES package through the SBA and SBDC and banks. I'm Jim D'Antona, President, CEO of the SLO Chamber, and we're so thankful to have everyone with us today for this important conversation. Some quick notes before we get started about the structure today. We will have our speakers give the presentations, and then we will utilize the Zoom Q&A structure for questions afterwards. You should see a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen that says Q&A. That's where to pose your questions at that time. Please don't use the chat. It starts getting things going the wrong way. The Q&A is where we will pull our questions from. As we work through the federal stimulus package on all sides, there are a lot of questions about how this process is working and how to work through the issues that are presenting themselves. That's why we're so thankful today to have three great representatives with us who are working in that system now to help us understand some of the details of what's happening at the moment. From the Small Business Development Center, Executive Director Judy Mahan is here to give us updates from the SBA side. We are also joined by Lindsay Waylett, Vice President of Customers Bank, a national SBA lender, and Greg Bland, the San Luis Obispo Market President from Bank of America. So before we get started with our comments, I think it's key to underline a few items about this conversation. First, we know that our business community and members are very anxious about their businesses and making sure they can keep their businesses afloat, not just for their own livelihood, but also for their employees. The stimulus dollars offered in the loan package are the lifeline to our business owners, and so they're extremely anxious about understanding this process. With that said, let's also recognize the CARES package was passed less than 2 weeks ago, and our SBA and banking system have been trying to figure out how to make all of this work over a 10-day period, not just for a small region, Southern California, Northern California, but for the entire United States. So there are definitely still some unknowns as things move forward, and they are figuring these things out literally hour by hour in some cases. So we're really appreciative for everyone joining us today so that we can get to the best info out to the community. Judy, we'll go ahead and start with you to talk about the latest with the SBA, SBDC, and the programs and when those are at. Judy, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm so glad to be here today. So I actually have a PowerPoint presentation. I think it'll help highlight the programs that are available for business owners. I'm going to switch over to the presentation right now and do a screen share. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yep, got it here.
Awesome, thank you. So we are the Cal Poly CIE Small Business Development Center, and so we're funded by the SBA. So we have a direct relationship with the SBA, we work with the SBA, and we're here to share the resources that they've made available over the last 3 weeks. There are 1,000 SBDCs nationwide, and we're incredibly lucky to have one right here in downtown San Luis Obispo. But we are all working remotely at this time, but we're working, we're available, we can answer questions from local business owners, from any business owner in San Luis Obispo County. What I'm going to look over today is what are the options from the funding perspective for your business? What are considerations that you need to have in mind when evaluating the workforce right now and how to manage that over the next couple months? And then putting some thought towards what happens when we come out of the storm. How do we relaunch business? How do we get back on our feet? So we'll be doing an overview of these three main topics here today. To safeguard your business right now, there are three main areas of focus for business owners. One is the number one priority is to look at your lease, talk to your landlord and see if you can obtain either a deferment or some kind of reduction in your lease payment over the next couple of months. That's something that you can look into to try and minimize your expenses for now. Of course, there are loans that we're going to look into, disaster loans, but also regular loans that you can tap into. And talk to your insurance provider. See if there's any type of coverage that you can tap into through the insurance company. There are different types of funding available for your business. Right now, we're going to focus mostly on what's available through the SBA, but there are still other opportunities out there. We're seeing some people have success with crowdfunding. The community is eager to support their local businesses, and crowdfunding is a good way for them to show their support to make sure that their favorite businesses stay in business. We have startups that have contacted and connected with their existing investors to see if it would make sense to do some kind of bridge loan financing to help keep them afloat. So that's something to consider as a startup, is to go back to your existing investors and see if there's a way to do another round of funding until you can be back in business in a normal fashion. There are traditional loans that are still available through banks. They are extremely overloaded right now, Jim, as you mentioned, with trying to process PPP loan applications. But within 2 to 3 weeks, we're hoping we'll have plateaued in the demand for the disaster loans. And after that 2 to 3 week time frame, the banks will be available to jump back in and look at traditional options for lines of credit and other SBA loans, traditional loans that will still be available. And of course, you could use your credit cards temporarily. Maybe you need to use your credit card to help you over the next 8-week period. But we're not recommending that people do. This is, a last resort, but that could be something that you could work with to help you manage expenses right now. So what is available through the SBA? We have the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which went live about 3 weeks ago. So we'll touch on that. We have the Paycheck Protection Program that went live under the CARES Act about 10 days ago. And then there's some debt relief available for business owners that have existing SBA loans in place. They can obtain some relief on those existing loans that they took out prior to February 15, 2020. Oops, sorry. So on the EIDL loan, what's new? First and foremost, if you applied for the loan prior to March 30th, 2020, we recommend that you go back into the portal with the SBA and reapply for the loan to make sure you get access for the $10,000 loan advance that's available through this program. If you applied and did not get the opportunity to check the box for the $10,000 loan advance, you probably did not ask to qualify for it. And that's why we're recommending to go back into the portal, reapply. It won't affect your first application in any way, shape, or form, but it will give you access to potentially obtaining up to $10,000 upfront. This $10,000 will be forgiven by the SBA. So it's a loan advance that will be forgiven. You will not have to pay it back. In addition to that up to $10,000 max loan advance, you can also qualify under EIDL for up to $2 million per business. It's a 30-year term at a 3.75% interest rate. This loan can be used to pay all business expenses, including payroll, including pretty much anything that would show up on your accounts payable. You can use it to pay suppliers, vendors. So it's a good interest rate. It's worth looking into, especially. Oops, I lost. Okay, sorry. Especially, I'll talk about a strategy on how you can apply for EIDL and for the PPP loan program at the same time and use each one for different purposes. So on the EIDL, the loans do not require collateral if you are seeking $25,000 or less. If you're seeking more than $25,000, the SBA will ask for collateral, but if you cannot provide it, you may still qualify for more. Let's see, you will need to have a credit score of 660 or more. And when the case manager gets in touch with you, they will be asking for backup documents that were not submitted at the time of the online application. They will ask for your profit and loss statement for 2019, and they will ask for tax returns for 2018 and 2017. You must have been affected by COVID. You can apply for this loan, but you're going to have to show that you had revenue loss during this first quarter or between the start of this year and basically today's date. You have to be a business that has less than 500 employees. Corporations, sole proprietors, independent contractors can all apply for an EIDL loan. And if you are a nonprofit exempt under IRS Section 501, C, D, or E, you can apply for an EIDL loan. Here is the website right here, covid19relief.sba.gov. That is the portal to apply for EIDL. I gave you a quick overview of the other information that may be requested by your case manager. And this loan will be available all the way through December 31st, 2020. Here's the hotline right here, 1-800-659-2955. The hotline is working, it's available. You get the chance to talk to a live person immediately. If you want to check on an existing application, you can call this hotline to check in. You're not able to check on the status of your application online. You can only check on it by phone. We had a consultant from our task force that tested the hotline today and got put straight through to an SBA representative. So it's working, they're answering questions. Use that 800 number if you're feeling, if you want to check in on the status of your loan. Here's a slide that gives you an overview of what does it look like if I did borrow $25,000 over a 30-year period. Your payments would be approximately, would be $116 per month. If you were to borrow $50,000 over 30 years, that would give you payments of $230 a month and $463 per month if you borrowed $100,000. So that gives you an idea of what you're in for if you decide to move forward on this loan. Now, the second pathway, the other opportunity that came about is the PPP loan. The PPP loan, you can get up to $10 million per business. The interest rate is 1% and the term is only 2 years. So it's a much shorter term than the EIDL loan. Next slide. There are no fees to apply for this loan. So the difference between PPP and EIDL as far as processing is concerned, and this is where Lindsay and Greg will be able to help and add to the conversation and explain the process. You do have to apply through your bank. So step one is calling your bank, the bank that you do business with for your business accounts. Check in with them to see if they are SBA approved lenders. If they are an SBA approved lender, then they can help you process your PPP application. No personal guarantees are needed, no collateral. The loan will be deferred for 6 months. On the EIDL loan, that one will be deferred for 12 months. There are not too many backup documents that are being requested for this loan, but again, I'm going to let Lindsay and Greg address that issue. For the most part, you'll be asked to certify in good faith the claims that you're making in your application. You must also have been affected by COVID. You must have less than 500 employees. Again, corporations, sole proprietors, independent contractors can apply, as well as nonprofits. You can borrow up to 2.5 times your average payroll for 1 month. And we're looking at the 12-month period between February 1, 2019 and January 31st, 2020. So if you look at your one average month of payroll during that time period times 2.5 is the amount you can borrow. In the borrower application form, it asks you to add into that number whatever you've obtained under EIDL. Most businesses have not yet received any money under EIDL, so that number currently is 0. You do not need to add in anything supplemental to that number. We can talk about the details through Q&A as to what counts as payroll. one thing that keeps that the question we get often is any employee who makes more than who is being paid more than $100,000, including draws made by the owners of the business. Anything in excess of $100,000 cannot be counted towards payroll, but you do count the full 100K. And you could add on to that 100K anything that's being paid towards health insurance and other benefits. Moving on. So this is what it looks like, the calculations. If you had an annual payroll of approximately $120,000, you would take that number, divide it by 12, and multiply it by 2.5. So you could qualify for a $25,000 loan. If you had an annual payroll of $1.2 million, you could qualify for a maximum amount of $250,000. How much gets forgiven? So you need to spend the loan during the 8-week period after you obtain this loan. So it's the amount that you spend down. The amount that is spent down, you must use at least 75% of that amount towards payroll, and you can use the remaining 25% towards rent or towards utilities or towards any interest due on a mortgage. So as long as you meet those requirements, the entirety of that loan will be forgiven. We can talk during the Q&A about the issue around the number of employees that are kept on board or that have been laid off or rehired. So we'll get into the details on that through Q&A. You need to process through an SBA approved lender. So your bank, if your bank is not an SBA approved lender, we are trying to compile a list of other options, other opportunities. We're very lucky in our community. We have local community banks and as well as our credit unions who are doing everything they can to become SBA approved, and hopefully will be approved in the next few days. There are some options online, some fintech startups that are allowing non-clients to process PPP loans through them, and we can share information about that as well. I think I've covered, oh, and then, so this is the third option as well. If you have an existing loan with the SBA that you took out prior to February 15, actually, sorry, that was issued before September 27, 2020, the SBA will cover that loan for you, will pay principal and interest for up to 6 months. So that's another huge relief that businesses can get on existing loans that they have in place with the SBA. And it doesn't preclude you from applying for PPP and EIDL, the EIDL loan. So what can you do to prepare for reopening? I think what we're anticipating is a very gradual restart as the shelter at home and or lockdown regulations are loosened up. So, you know, it won't be an immediate reboot, but a gradual restart. So let's prepare for that and adapt financials accordingly. Make sure you communicate with your employees, make sure that they're ready to come back on board. You may have furloughed employees. You may have had to terminate certain employees, but maybe you can hire them back to get ready for a reboot. Expect that it won't be business, it won't be the same business activities that will be taking place as they were prior to COVID. One area, for example, just to share an anecdote, businesses that are launching new food and beverage products that are doing sampling, product demos with large grocery chains, those likely won't be happening anymore. I think consumers are going to be changing their behaviors and not tapping into certain habits or patterns that they were used to doing before COVID. Now's a good time to think about marketing. What will your marketing and your messaging look like when we reboot? It'll probably be an entirely different type of messaging than what you've been doing up until now. So some things to think about as you're moving forward. And last but not least, we're here to help. please send your request to slosbdc@gmail.com. We set up that email just as an emergency email to process anything that is COVID related in connection with your business. Please send us your inquiries, your questions at slosbdc@gmail.com. We're here to help you out and answer questions. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Judy. And tomorrow, April 10th, is opening for the filing of independent contractors for these. Okay. So starting tomorrow, we'll get moving on those. Independent contractor ones too are now open. Great. Well, let me also now move over to our other panelists here, Lindsay Waylett, who has been, who's part of Customers Bank and is an SBA lender, is here and we have two I think, very different types of banks here, Bank of America on one side and Customer. So Lindsay, if you could give us a flavor of how you are seeing the loan PPP piece come in and how you're kind of interacting with your customers, I think that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you first for having me today. Having a lender's perspective, existing SBA lender for many years, this is obviously a very different process, very different product, very streamlined. The day that we received guidance really from SBA was the first day that applicants were applying with their bank. So that just, it was a shotgun start, to say the least, at the entire program itself. And so what's been, I think, probably the challenge is just the sheer volume of having so many businesses be eligible under the SBA guidelines, which also include nonprofits, which is new. Typically that's not an eligible business type for financing for SBA. So almost all 30 million plus businesses, small businesses in America, are vying for the $350 billion that's been allocated for this program. So there's an urgency there besides just being able to process logistically. That has been, I think, the primary issue. I think any banks opting in want to help their clients. They really do see that there's a benefit to preserving the bank's viability of their existing loan portfolio, but they also really want to maintain their customers for these 8 weeks, where really there's just so many unknown, there's nothing really certain at this point. But again, it goes back to logistics. On a day-to-day, I spend quite a bit of time on the phone, sending emails. I'm working directly. It's a different approach probably than Greg has. I don't have a digital portal. So we're working with clients to be able to get the forms, the backup verification for the payroll, and then submitting it through our internal process that we've designed. And it's been continually I'd say upgraded throughout the process every day. Sometimes multiple times a day, we change our process or procedure to make sure that we're trying to, make everything as efficient as possible for the customer. Ultimately to, at this point, which is the most critical piece, is getting the funds reserved from SBA. The second piece will be funding, which with guidance from SBA received yesterday, being able to get the loans closed and then funded into business accounts is next step. And then I foresee in the larger phase 2, I would say, is the forgiveness piece, which most banks at this point haven't really even gotten to that piece of logistics. It's really just trying to get the volume of customers reserved funding from SBA. So they know that it's coming, and usually from then it's a matter of days for funding.
And so just real quick, is your bank taking on outside people, or is it strictly your clients that you're dealing with?
We are taking non-bank customers. We are prioritizing existing customers primarily because we have everything on file and it's a faster, more efficient process for the compliance reasons. But we are accepting new clients. We are asking that they open a deposit account to fulfill the compliance needs necessary for the loan. It also makes funding easier when we get to the point where we can close, sign, and then put the funds into an account. So we have decided to take outside non-bank clients. But for the most part, what we're trying to do in the first 3-4 days has been process the existing clients, because we have most things on file other than the payroll reports and the actual application from our clients. but I've accepted my day-to-day is primarily non-bank clients, getting them in line and processed and making sure they fill out both the new account paperwork as well as the PPP loan application.
And how are you seeing that being processed through the SBA? Are you starting to see, like, are those connections being made? Are they getting the paperwork, making decisions?
Yes. Yeah, by far. I mean, it's been, for the most part, it's very simple application, very simple guidance as far as what verification documents are needed for payroll. So that part has been, I would say, the easier part. It's just handling the volume of people that want an answer and want it now, because they're making real-time decisions with their business and their people, and need to know that they won't be so far in line that they potentially miss out on this round of funds. So I would say yes. I mean, it's getting SBA loan numbers has been the critical piece of the process. So we have designed a process where we verify as much as we can, and then when we submit for SBA, we're ready to fund quickly thereafter.
Awesome. Thanks for that update. Now we'll jump real quick over to Greg and get the other version of how you're processing. Greg Bland of Bank of America is with us. So we'll get you unmuted here. And then you can give us your take on kind of the process and how that's working.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to the conference today. And yeah, we started off early, and we were working with the Treasury Department and SBA when the CARES Act got approved, and worked closely with them to be able to launch the application to we have 1 million customers, business customers throughout the nation. And so we were able to make that available to them on Friday, April 3rd through a digital portal. They have two access. They have a Cash Pros, what we call it, or small business banking online. And so we are ready to go. The application is relatively simple, but on that Friday, we made it available to our clients that had both a depository and credit relationship with us. That was the priority. On Friday evening, we had collected 99,000 applications, representing about 25 billion in loan requests. Through Friday night and Saturday morning, we opened it up to a broader base of our clients with deposit accounts with us, and who did not have a credit relationship with another bank. If they had a credit relationship with another bank, we wanted them to go to their bank first where they got the credit. Through that process, and then on Monday, we had received, and actually on Tuesday morning, I think we had received up to 233,000 applications, representing about 38 billion of loan requests. So that was kind of the first launch, and we haven't changed it hadn't lifted any restrictions. So it's still either depository or credit relationships that we have at the bank. Today, I was on a call this morning, and the applications are up to 292,000, representing 44 billion. So what we're doing, and we're dedicating a lot of resources to process all these applications. And so for what we're doing is verifying information that was provided by our clients, having our clients upload documents that are required, and they could do that upload through their digital portal. So everything is uploaded into that portal. And then that, of course, goes to the SBA. SBA approves it, and then we fund the loan once it's approved. Just as of last night, we received the promissory note, and so we're making that available through our portal to our clients to actually sign in anticipation of an approval, right? So we want all the documents ready to go. So they're receiving those today. And then I've heard actually on the East Coast, we're already starting funding today, as early as today. So that's pretty much the process. We've dedicated about 2,000 employees to process the applications. They're working 3 shifts. So we have, quite a bit of manpower behind this. And, I think the challenge maybe, or the block, is going to be the SBA, right? So as they continue to receive more volume, we'll see if, they could turn it around and provide the approval. But we're in a pretty good position. We feel very confident to be able to process the applications that we've received so far, and have the ability to fund those loans right into their account.
Well, that sounds pretty incredible to get the loans potentially already in the funding, even the most early, even if it was the first day they did on the 3rd. That means within 6 days we've got a decision and funding on some of these things. Obviously, it's not going to happen that fast for everyone, and there's going to be a lot of, but that's pretty amazing turnaround, right? I mean, in terms of a loan, any loan.
It is, and I think that also speaks to what Lindsay was saying too. As far as our existing clients, we have a lot. We know them, right? And so we have all the a lot of information that we would need to make them a loan. We already have it, and so I think that makes it a lot easier and smoother process.
And usually, if they have is it with a predatory, with a credit relationship with you, those are even easier than just a standard banking procedure with you?
I think so, because we've kind of vetted the client through the credit process, if you will, compared to like a depository only client. We wouldn't have that same information.
Great. Well, it's certainly helpful, I think, for all of us to see or hear how much is being processed. I mean, the number of applications that B of A is going through is staggering, and to think about that just by itself, and you're obviously one of the big banks, but to know that much processing is going in 290. You said 290,000 at this point.
It's 292. Yeah.
Yeah. Is truly incredible. And so I'm sure, are you starting to, as with most of these, as any business that was coming down during the emergency crisis, are you finding that where there's bandwidth that you would shift and move people around to make sure you're catching all of these places?
Most definitely. Yeah. A lot of us are working from home because of the crisis and the stay-at-home order. We have 150,000 of our 260,000 associates working from home. So that was, started a couple of weeks ago. And then we are also shifting associates around so that they may not be doing their normal function today. And we're just directing them to this application process and making sure that our clients get their applications processed as quick as possible and the funding to them. So.
And it sounds like this is from I don't know if you're having conversations with your other colleagues in other banks, but is this pretty much the standard of what's going on between everybody's businesses?
Well, I haven't had a lot of opportunities to talk with some other bankers, but what I hear just, from others and from what I could read, everyone is kind of going through the same process and really trying to process the volume that's coming in.
Well, I'll just, the questions are piling up quickly. So we'll jump over to that and we'll get Judy back on here. And because some of these there's a lot of questions here related around all the EIDL loans. So I'll kick off with the EIDL. Judy, right now, looking at the EIDL loans, do you know if there's an average time frame for a response on kind of EIDL?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we are seeing the loan advances coming in. They just started coming in literally on Tuesday. And we calculated the time. So it seems like it was made about 10 days after the application for that particular applicant. So expect 10 days for the loan advance. And once you get the loan advance, the case manager gets in touch. We'll follow up for some backup documentation to see how much you qualify for the actual loan amount, and then it'll go from there. But at a minimum 10 days.
And usually for those folks who may have applied prior to March 30th, are we, and we were talking about reapplying, there was, I guess, somebody who tried to the hotline. The hotline said just email disasterloans@sba.gov and ask to add that. Would you recommend that? Consider it? No, just go through the.
Reply. Please reapply. There's been a lot of conflicting. It's very strange. There's been a lot of conflicting information. Our task force consultant who called the hotline today, she had been told by a client that the client had been told by the SBA to reapply every 3 days. So the SBA is like, no, please don't do that. The SBA has told us directly, it's just you reapply once, but yes, reapply, but just do it once.
Great. Question about wineries. Do they fall under the agriculture business disqualification? Do you know?
No, I don't think they do. If they're manufacturing product, I'm actually 99% sure they qualify to apply. I will triple check. So I have a call at 3 p.m. with the SBA, a formal call, where we're able to get all the updates from them and able to ask all our questions. So I will ask that question and we will definitely figure out a way to share. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and respond back to the folks who left that question.
Yeah, I'm making a note of that.
Are farmers part of PPP, but not EIDL, or is it neither?
So EIDL, they can apply if they're a cooperative or a nursery. There's certain categories that can apply, but for the most part, farmers cannot apply to EIDL. Again, PPP, it's a gray zone. That was one of my main questions actually for the 3 p.m. call. So I'll have an answer for that as well.
Great. It is, as the EIDL loans are kind of going through, is there a calculation to the loan amount? Is it based on how much you lost?
Yes. So there's a distinction there. So you have to showcase revenue loss, but the loan isn't based on that. You just have to have proof that you were affected by COVID, and proof of being affected by COVID is revenue loss. So once you've shown revenue loss, the amount of the loan is calculated based on your average monthly expenses in 2019. What were your average expenses in 1 month? And that number is multiplied by 6. So the idea is they want to give you enough runway to navigate this piece and have enough working capital over the next 6 months to be able to get through this.
And as a sole proprietor, you can qualify for EIDL or PPP?
Correct.
Okay, great. And looking at the fact that banks in general, well, I think this is there going to be more room do you think, for banks to accept more applications than they have at the moment? Are we trying to create more runway, new banks, other opportunities?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Greg mentioned they expanded their bandwidth. They more than doubled it, or they're seeking to do that over the next few days. I know that the Federal Reserve, there was a press release that came out yesterday. They're loosening up the restrictions that they had imposed on Wells Fargo to allow them to get on board and process more of these loans. So that's actually a really big deal. If Wells Fargo is able to process more of these, that will be incredibly helpful. We have CESLOC that's in the process of applying to become qualified. So yes, absolutely. I think every bank is seeking to expand bandwidth in some way, shape, or form. And those who are not SBA approved are, this is an opportunity to do that and to get on board.
Great. And we have a question here, but I think I heard this one last time. You actually, or the SBDC is recommending that you do apply for both EIDL and the PPP loans. You can do both, right? Correct?
Absolutely. Please do both. Please do both. See what you qualify for. The trick is going to be, once you obtain these loans, is how you use those funds. So make sure that you track really well what funds you're using for what. As mentioned, if you can maximize PPP for payroll expenses, you'll be able to get a maximum amount forgiven under that loan. And then the idle loan, which is not forgivable at this point in time, except for that $10,000 loan advance, you can use that for all of your other expenses.
And LLCs can apply for the PPP?
Yes, 100% yes, yes.
Great. We're getting just trying to get all these questions into the same spot.
So maybe one thing that can help is you can make as many applications as you have EIN numbers available. So if you have an EIN number, that's one application. And if you have more entities in place, then you can do one for each entity that you have in place.
Our banks someone has a bank that's saying they need their 2019 Schedule C for the PPP. Is that accurate? If not, Greg or Lindsay, do you have any, is that something that you know that was required in what you're seeing in the filings?
I'm not seeing that required that it be an actual tax return filing. A profit and loss statement for a sole proprietor is sufficient.
Yeah, that's what from most of the conversations we've been hearing, we've heard that too. Mm-hmm. Judy, do you have to maintain the number of employees in that 8-week period that you did the basis on?
No, my understanding is that you don't. At the end of the day, the amount forgiven is what you spend on payroll. So whatever you need to do with your employees, you need to do what you have to do. Your employees have to have a role and a responsibility. They have to have work to do. If they don't, you have to kind of reorganize your workforce. So no, you don't have to maintain everyone in place, but the hope is once you get the funding that you will use that to rehire and to create opportunity to best prepare your business to navigate this and to be ready to reboot once we're somewhat back to normal.
The independent contract, can you go over one more time tomorrow's starting applications for independent contractor? Is that'll be available for PPP and EIDL, or the EIDL's already been available, or? Yeah.
Yes, so EIDL, go for it now. You don't have to wait. You can apply for EIDL immediately, even if you're an independent contractor, if you're a sole proprietor, if you're self-employed, if you're a gig worker. And to your point, yes, PPP, you will have to wait until tomorrow.
What is the backup you're requiring for health insurance premium? Have we determined that? Right. Very specific. Yeah. So probably your bills and who's being covered by it would seem to be the one.
I think, at the end of the day, they're asking for proof of payroll to support the number that you're reporting on your borrower lender form. So you have to be comfortable that if you were audited, you would be able to provide the supporting paperwork. So they've been very flexible as far as what counts as proof of payroll. So yes, records from your payroll processor are ideal. If you have 1099s, if you have bank statements, anything that can show transactions taking place, bank statements are valid, proof of payroll. So they're being pretty flexible, but you are going to have to be able to prove that money has been spent on payroll, and that's how you're justifying the amount that you're requesting for the loan.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, it's making sure you keep that paper trail for all of those things. Greg, if I can go back to you here real quick. If they are a B of A customer, how do they connect to someone, or how can they get in touch with someone at B of A?
About the PPP loan?
Yes.
Yeah, they should have digital access to the application through their either their product called Cash Pro, which is an online portal for business clients for a certain size, and then Small Business Banking Online is another portal. So we have two portals. If they don't have a portal, then they need to contact someone at the bank, and then we will create a one-time ID for them to go on to one of the portals to apply.
Okay, great. And Lindsay, maybe this would be a question you could help on here. So this person's bank said they can't submit a loan yet because SBA has denied all 4K loan apps. I'm going to just, I think that's what it's called. I'm a longtime customer with them. Is that also happening in your banks? Are you seeing that?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but I haven't seen SBA rejecting any of our loan submissions as far as funding. We've already verified everything internally before we submit to SBA to reserve funds. So maybe I'm not understanding the question, but I haven't seen, it's more a matter of making sure that we can actually get through to SBA to get the SBA loan number that we need to be able to document the loan so we can fund. Because obviously the volume to SBA is so great that that's probably our challenge more than having any declines. I don't think there's really a basis for declining if the borrower is certifying and providing the verification documents. The application's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
And the eligibility standards are pretty wide, wider than a typical SBA loan has ever been.
And from what you're seeing, I know potentially the Lendios and Cabbage are doing, the online bankers are trying to, are they an option? Judy, you may also want to weigh in on this, as for folks who banks are not getting there?
Yeah. So unfortunately, so Lendio, we've had a couple clients successfully submit PPPs through Lendio. So Lendio has been working really well. And some of our larger, this has been true for some of our very large business owners with, 100 employee type business owners. So Lendio has been great. Cabbage has not yet qualified with the SBA. So unfortunately, we were somewhat misled because they tell you, yes, we're processing, sign up. And then you come to find out that they're actually not SBA approved yet. So they are trying to get approved, but Cabbage may not be the immediate perfect source quite yet. I've also heard that people who use Gusto for payroll processing, that Gusto is helping its client base connect with other fintech companies that are processing these loans. So if you're using Gusto, they have resources there to help guide you to fintech companies online that are processing PPPs.
And so I got a few questions coming around the sole proprietorship taking advantage of PPP. Because there's potentially no payroll draws, are those considered the same or are those different, or we're not yet having any clarity on that?
They can apply. They just need to prove, they need to be ready to prove that there are some draws somehow. That's kind of the bottom line. If you can't prove draws, are these businesses going to get audited? Are these sole proprietors going to get audited? I'm not sure. I don't know. But when you sign your certifications on the borrower form, read those certifications. And if you're certifying that this is true, that you can prove that that you drew $100,000 last year, be ready to be able to prove that beyond just signing off on the certification. Unfortunately, there's always a portion of potential fraud, and the SBA at some point in time will have to crack down on that once the dust settles. So be mindful, make sure you can prove everything that you certify. Great.
And multi-owner PPP applications, and maybe Greg and Lindsay be able to help on this one. Are you guys processing multi-owner PPP applications, or is that set off to a side? Or additionally, is there another avenue that would be more helpful to go through if you're a multi-owner PPP application?
We've been processing multiple owner PPP applications just the same as single owners. Really, there's no differences, maybe a little bit more detail as far as writing in any of the owners on addendums for the application. It does want to know if any other owners have any ownership in other entities, and that seems to be the case often when there's a multiple owner company, but we are treating them the same as a single owner company.
Yeah, we are too. And I think the big challenge is the owners that have multiple entities, and each entity has to apply on its own. So, you know, so it's kind of through our portal, we have to create like another ID for that other entity so they have access to another application. So, but we're handling that as well.
Great. And there's a bunch of questions here. I think we've answered a few times, but I'll just confirm. If you have an EIN number for them, you can go ahead and submit a application for them, whether it's 1, 2, 3, whatever, where you have the EINs for, you can apply on all of those, correct?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. The question on workers' comp insurance counting as a payroll cost, I haven't heard that question yet. Is that something, you know, would qualify as part of the expenses to be forgiven, or not really?
I think, sorry, I'm blanking out all of a sudden on the, I have shared the PowerPoint presentation with the chamber just now. Jackie will be able to share it with attendees. It's totally fine. So I'm pulling up on PPP. We have a list of specifically what was in the legislation. So you can include salaries, wages, commissions, any type of similar compensation, payments of cash tips or equivalents, vacation, parental, family, medical, and sick leave. So any payments made for that. And yes, you can include payments for group health care benefits, including insurance premiums, and payments for retirement benefits. Also payments for state or local taxes assessed on the compensation of employees. So that's everything that can be included in the payroll calculation.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure that's very helpful because there are all those pieces that connect for that. Talking about having a previous SBA loan and looking for that forgiveness of principal and interest, does that go straight through the same SBA process? Or would that, I know it was in the PowerPoint that we'll be sharing, but how does that happen again?
So there is information on the SBA website. There is the SBA debt relief section if you go on sba.gov. And I have not walked anyone through the process yet, so I'm not sure if it has to go through the lender, if the lender needs to be involved in the process or not. Lindsay or Greg, have you had any experience with the debt relief program?
I haven't specifically, but I know our bank took all auto pay off, so there wasn't a problem with having to reverse payments should SBA pay this month. We've assumed that they will, at least within 30 days of the April due date. That's what we interpret the guidance to be. So we haven't seen those come in to my knowledge yet, but we're anticipating that it's any existing loan in good standing should be paid by SBA for 6 full months. So we're not taking customer payments right now. But we haven't had the customers necessarily call us to notify us of that. We report to SBA and have, you know, accounting for every single SBA loan on our books already. So it should be fairly automatic.
And I know nobody here is from Wells Fargo, but do you know, Judy, or heard anything about when they're reopening to take up more loans? Has that been any communicated at all?
It came out just yesterday. So the Federal Reserve was assessing yesterday. I don't know. I don't know how quickly they're able to turn that around.
Yeah, and a lot of this is, I don't know if you're, again, if all of these loans, these applications are being triggered back from federal rules about how much you can put on your books based on your liquidity or any of that. Greg and Lindsay, is the government taking those handcuffs off?
I think they're taking the handcuffs off as far as limiting volume. I think it's likely to be inherent within the volume just of serving your existing clients and potentially then some if you're opting in. But I don't know for sure. I would assume that's the case because I haven't heard anything internally that we're reaching a cap or we have a certain volume expectations. I think those, like you said, constraints are no longer in the program for this product.
And, oh, go ahead, Judy.
Sorry, if I can just jump in. I just shared in the chat box the two contacts for the SBA to specific for SBA debt relief. So there's an 800 number for the for two different locations in the U.S. So I would encourage anyone who wants debt relief maybe to start with one of these 800 numbers.
And, you know, as we're coming down the last few minutes, we got so many questions. What I'll tell our guests is we will try to compile all these and try to find some information. Some of them might have been answered, but the list now is so long. Apparently we could do a 4-day webinar and maybe get through all the questions. But what happens if you get the $10,000, but then don't qualify for the EIDL? Is that forgiven, or how's that?
That's a good question. We haven't seen that yet. What we have been asked is, what if I get the $10,000 advance and then I decide I don't want the actual loan part? And that's fine. We say just take it, let it sit there for a couple of months to assess where you're at with your business. Worst case scenario, you'll have incurred interest for a couple of months, maybe a couple $100 at most. It's worth the opportunity of having this money there as a sort of a line of credit. And if you decide you don't need it, just pay it right back. There's no prepayment penalty. There's no, and it is deferred for 12 months anyway. So, you know, apply for it and see if you need it.
And there's just, I found one more question, which I love, and it's a question more about our community and trying to make sure we're not taking what we shouldn't. Is there any business who should not apply, other than the obvious greater than 500 employees? How bad should the impact be before feeling comfortable that it would be sufficient to qualify as impacted? As obviously not everyone will get funded at those levels. And where is it, how bad should the hit have been so that you should get at the front of the line, et cetera? I know it's kind of a judgment call here personally, but any thoughts you have about where that line should be drawn?
They're being processed first come, first served. So, you know, even if someone is in a more desperate situation than someone else who applied at a different time, you know, the SBA can't manage that aside from processing on a first come, first served basis. And that's how they're being processed. You know, it's a super hard question to answer because I think for a lot of business owners, no one can foresee what's going to happen over the next 6 months. So I would recommend, if you think you might need it, apply for it. So you're not left stranded, and then you have this buffer. EIDL is, you know, it's a 30-year term. It's a low interest rate. It would be ideal to, you know, if you're hesitant, I would say lean towards going for it rather than not. I don't think it's a question. I mean, I may be being naive, but it's not a greed issue. It's more of I'm running a business. I need to make I need to build up a reserve or you know, I need to manage and make sure that I can handle the next 6 months that are coming my way.
No, and I agree. I get the point. It's a tough question. And it's, you know, we just don't want to go to that point where we saw with, you know, on our store shelves, right? The toilet paper, the, you know, the cloth towel, hand towels disappearing when you don't need to stockpile. But I totally get that for a business owner, you just don't know, is this a 1 month, 2 month, 6 month item and where you're going to fit. But definitely as just having a conversation with someone to this issue. And so thought it was an interesting question and something we all had to consider. Well, it's 3 o'clock. I really appreciate Lindsay, Greg, and Judy. Thank you so much for spending time with us. For our folks who came and dropped questions, we're going to go ahead and copy them, see if we can get them all answered. Maybe, hopefully most of them got answered. I saw there were a lot of that kind of overlapped. But we will try to get back to you. We will then also take this webinar, upload it on our system. So if you need to go back and look through, plus we'll have a follow-up email that will share Judy's PowerPoint presentation with everyone so that we can, again, we're just trying to get as much good information out in the community. I really appreciate all three of you spending time with us because we know you got a lot to do. So thank you so much, and everyone have a great day. Stay healthy out there.